Okay, guys, so let's continue with chapter 7. Chapter 7 is all about motivating followers, right? So let's start with something simple but important. Why do people actually work hard, right? Not just show up, but actually try. Well, because as a supervisor, this is our job, right? You're not just managing work, you're managing human behavior. And here's the key idea for today. Motivating is not just something you force, but is something that you have to decide, right? Great supervisors don't rely on yelling or pressure or fear. They create a system where people want to perform. Okay, so let's continue. Now, this slide shows a huge problem, right, in companies and organizations. A lot of employers think that employees leave because of growth opportunities or flexibility. But employees actually say that they leave because they want a better pay or job security. So this mismatch is dangerous because if you misunderstand what people value, uh, you will fail to motivate them, right? Now let's define something very important: job satisfaction. Right? This is how people feel about their job emotionally, not just logically, but emotionally. So here's the teaching point. People don't just leave jobs, they leave environments that don't meet their needs, right? And, turnover is how uh, we define turnover as when employees quit or quit their job, right? So that's when we say that a business has a high turnover ratio, it means that a lot of workers leave that job, right? So turnover. All right, let's continue. Now we zoom in on the individual, right? This slide shows that behavior comes from multiple sources, right? We have personality, how somebody naturally thinks or acts. We have early experiences, right? How they were raised, biology, right? Or physiological factors, right? Which is energy, stress, or physical traits. We have culture, which are the values and expectations that each employee has, and social dynamics, right? How others influence them. And one key concept is emotional contagion, right? That means that people catch emotions from others, right? So if a supervisor is negative, stressed, or frustrated, that quickly spreads. But on the other hand, if they are calm, focused, or positive, right, that spreads too. So motivation is not just individual. Motivation is a social act, a social thing, right? So this is what determines human behavior. Okay. Now, this is one of the most important frameworks. People have layers of needs, right? At the very bottom, they have basic uh, uh, biological needs, right? Food, they have to pay rent, they need a roof on their heads, right? This is the most basic of needs, right? And sometimes we refer this scheme as the Maslow hierarchy of needs or the ERG synthesized, right? So at the very bottom, you have biological, physiological needs, right? And these needs, as supervisors or as organizations, we have to meet these needs. Uh, these are priority, and then we have to satisfy these as we move along, right? So very bottom is biological, right? Our employees, do they have food, right? Are they getting money for food, for rent, etc., right? There comes safety. Safety is job security, right? This is something that workers look for because they want to remain employed for the most part within 6, 7, 8, 9 months from starting a new job. And we call this job security, right? Or in this hierarchy of needs, it's the security or safety need, right? And then we have social, right? Belonging. Does the worker feel like they belong in that role? Do they feel welcomed? Right? This is another need, right? Self-respect, right? Or self-esteem. Um, do they feel respected? Do they feel praise from time to time when they do a good job, right? This is something very important. If you're not being praised at your job, you're going to feel like, well, why am I doing this, right? I don't feel rewarded. Yeah, I get paid, but it's good to feel rewarded from time to time. And we as supervisors, we have to keep this in mind. So next up, we have, what's this? Self-respect. We did that. Okay, cognitive. Um, Cognitive is the understanding or the, am I making something important in the job, right? So the cognitive need is um, when the worker feels that they understand the importance of the job and they feel satisfied, right? Then we have aesthetic. That is when the worker creates something uh, beautiful or something nice that is up there. Keep in mind, right? The most basic needs come first, right? These have to be uh, tackled first before you get to these upper ones. Because if you look at aesthetic, well, maybe that's not a priority, right? But then if we move on, we have self-fulfillment, right? This is the sense of achievement that a worker gets, right? And then the last one is transcendence. Transcendence is when you're helping the community or you're helping other workers. So as you can see, these are the hierarchy of needs, right? Um, these are the most fundamental ones, biological, security, social, respect. And then as we get to the top, we have some that might not be as crucial, right? For example, aesthetic, but just keep this in mind. Okay, so we have the the internal conflict here. People have, well, in one side they have drive, uh, which is the need for power or influence, right? A lot of people they want to control or have recognition or to have impact or to influence others, right? And we call this the needs for power or NPOW, right? That is your drive. But then also we have friction, which is the need for consistency, right? They want stability, they want predictability, right? And when these clash, you get cognitive dissonance, right? Your situation does not match your expectations, right? For example, I want responsibility, but I'm afraid of failing, right? And that tensions that that affects motivation, right? So supervisors must reduce friction while supporting growth. Okay. Okay. Now let's go over these real quick. So this is critical. There are two types of factors, right? When it comes to the Hesberg's motivation hygiene theory. Uh, on the left here, we have hygiene factors or the baseline, right? Which examples are pay, policies, working conditions. These don't motivate, right? They only prevent dissatisfaction, right? So this is your baseline in under Herzberg motivation theory, right? So this these elements in the work environment reduce dissatisfaction, but again, don't motivate. And then you have the engine motivation factors, right? Which are achievement, you have recognition, you have responsibility, and these create motivation, right? Because once you achieve something, once the worker reaches an achievement or a goal, they tend to get recognized and they have more responsibility, and this feels good, right? So you have, the two sides to Hesberg's, the baseline and the engine, right? Now, this is how employees think. At the very first, they're going to be thinking, is this worth it? Right? They have three parts: effort, right, which is if I try, right, right. Then they have performance. Will I succeed? Right. Then they have the outcome, right? Will I be rewarded? Now, if any of these break, motivation collapses, right? For example, um, why thrive if promotions are unfair, right? So supervisors must ensure that there's a clear link between effort, performance, and reward, right? Okay, let me move out of the way. Now, this is about fairness, okay? So employees consistently compare what I give versus what I get, right? And then compare to others. If it feels unfair, they will adjust behavior. They might work less, complain, leave, or even overcompensate, right? Perception matters more than reality. Now, so supervisors must manage, right, not just fairness, but perceived fairness, right? All right. Right. Theory X and theory Y, this is something that we've talked about before. Theory X is very old school and it assumes that employees don't like work or avoid responsibility, and they have to be coerced or like pushed to do their job. Now, some advantages in the short term, jobs may be done faster, because you're there as a supervisor micromanaging. But it has limitation, right? Micromanagement and close supervision lead to a lack of independence, right? And this might feel somewhat oppressive in the workplace, and a lot of uh, employees don't enjoy this type of management. Now, on the other hand, you have theory Y, and theory Y assumes that employees enjoy work and they seek responsibility and they can self-direct, to do a good job, to perform a task, and this leads to motivation. Um, the advantages we would say that the advantage is this makes the worker feel empowered, motivated, right? And the problem is that in some cases, it can be highly time consuming to implement, right? To train the worker to self-direct and perform at a high level. So these are the main two, like we saw in previous chapters, theory X and theory Y, styles of managerial archetypes. All right. So this is where the theory becomes action, right? We have three steps, right? The three step or the three phases of behavior shaping, right? We have antecedents, right, before the behavior. So set expectations clearly, right? We have to identify the undesirable behavior. If when we don't like something that the employee is doing, we have to address it, right? Set specific goals and arrange the environment so that the employee can achieve them, right? That's the first phase or the first step, the antecedent, setting the stage per se. Then we have behavior, right? Monitor and support, right? We're supposed to monitor performance, provide continuous feedback and support. So the core rule, you cannot change people, right? You can change only their behaviors, right? So that's the second phase. And then you have consequences, right? Reinforce the result, right? If somebody is doing a good job, reinforce it, right? If somebody's not doing it, address it. Okay. And this is the key. You don't change attitudes first. You change behaviors first, right? Then the attitude should follow suit. All right. So we have four tools of supervisors that they use, right? We have on one side we have positive reinforcement. We reward behavior that is good. so that we can foster that behavior, right? We have negative reinforcement when you remove something unpleasant, um, making behavior occur. One of the things, if you apply this negative reinforcement, it might backfire, right? Um, so it's not very advisable, right? We have punishment. It's pretty self-explanatory. Punishment is, there's a consequence, right? There's a consequence to a not performing well enough or doing something that you're not supposed to, right? And we have extinction, which good behavior disappears because it's not recognized or rewarded. So imagine that, you're doing a good job and you're never acknowledged by your supervisor. Well, that good task, that good deed is not going to repeat itself. It's not going to happen again, right? And we have these four, uh, you know, we call it the reinforcement quadrant, right? These are some techniques that you can use to uh, reinforce the, certain behaviors. Okay, now let's go to job design here. Let me move out of the way. Okay, hold on. I think I missed something back here. Let me make sure that I went over all of this. Yep. Now, the law of effect says, yeah, I missed that. The law of effect says that behavior with positive outcomes is repeated, right? Behavior with negative outcomes should be reduced, right? This is one of the most powerful tools in management, right? So the the law of effect. Okay, let's move on. Now, motivation isn't just about people, right? It's about the job, right? So you have four options. You have, and this is to designing a better uh, uh, environment for the worker. We can do certain things, right? So that workers don't feel bored or that workers don't feel like they're not being productive enough, right? We have job rotation, right? The first one I'm going to talk about this one, job rotation. So job rotation is when you take somebody from their regular job. Let's say that they're making, let's go back to McDonald's. They're making burgers, and they are the ones cooking the patties, so that that worker doesn't get bored, right? We can offer a job rotation. Maybe you want to do the registers. Do you want to be in charge of the registers? And maybe after a couple of months to 6 months, maybe you want to do the drive-through, right? And this is done so that the worker doesn't get bored, right? Because again, uh, if workers get bored, they don't feel fulfilled, they tend to quit, right? The turnover ratio goes up, turnover goes up, right? So job redesign, right? Uh, Job redesign is mostly improving the structure of the job, right? Making the job better, it increases motivation, right? Then we have job enrichment, right? Which is the making the job, adding more responsibilities to the job, right? And then we have multitasking. Multitasking is doing several roles at once. Maybe for some good workers out there, they can handle more, and that way they feel fulfilled. So um, these are some ways we can design better work. Okay. All right. Okay. So let's move on. Now let's talk about real world applications. So we have when we are faced with some issues, right? Maybe some negativity, or some something happened in the workplace and we have to address it, right? Maybe workers are not being motivated, and there's a lot of negative talk, right? So first we have to try to shift the mindset, right? The behavior, not the person, right? So don't label people. Uh, just focus on changing what they do, not who they are, right? Step two is find the facts, gather the facts, right? Talk in private, avoid these accusations, ask open-ended questions, address the issue clearly, right? That's pretty self-explanatory, right? Here it is. Yeah, accentuate the positive and build on strengths, right? Always have a positive tone when tackling some of these problems, right? Set expectations, right? Accountability. So state expectations for improvement. This is, I don't want you to do this. This is, let's say somebody's been misbehaving or has been accused of calling somebody names in the workplace, which shouldn't be happening, but you'll be surprised. So if this happens again, there's going to be your repercussion. There's going to be, you may be suspended for a few days, etc. Right? So there has to be accountability. Uh, and if this, whatever the worker is being accused of, if this happens again, then we have to escalate, right? If the behavior doesn't change, bring in upper management or human resources if needed, right? But the key, I would say, is this: don't label people, try to fix behavior. Okay. Okay. So everything connects here, right? Motivation is a cycle. Let me move out of the way. Motivation is a cycle. So you have mindset, right? Phase one would be mindset, theory Y, that, managers believe that the workers want to work and they want to produce something of quality, and they are looking forward to work. And then you have the environment, right? Which is the job design, which managers use to enrich their jobs, right? Be it rotation, be it job enrichment or multitasking, etc. Right? And then you have the needs, right? Are these needs being fulfilled, right? Maslow's, right? Biological needs, safety needs, uh, you can refer back to those needs. And then we have action, right? Because of the the expectancy theory, the employee exerts effort leading to a positive behavior. So this is if their needs are being met, if there is job enrichment, if everything's been clearly conveyed, we should have a positive behavior, a, 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 a happiness. The worker should be happy and looking forward to work. Now, and then phase five is maintenance, right? Manager sustains this behavior. This leads to, this cycle of motivation. But however, well, we should hope that it repeats, right? And 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 address anything if it needs to be addressed. Now, motivation is a system, not a single tactic, right? Just bear that in mind. Okay. And just to wrap it up, great supervisors understand people, right? Create fair systems, reinforce the right behaviors, and most importantly, they design environments where people want to succeed, right? This is crucial. Um, okay, so I'm gonna stop here because I think we went over the limit a little bit. I'll see you in the next chapter.